Today's lesson, 5.2, is found on page 199 of your big book. The title is Write Percents as Fractions and Decimals. And our essential question, how can you write percents as fractions and decimals? To write a percent as a fraction or a decimal, first write the percent as a ratio that compares a number to 100. Remember, 100 is our magic number for Chapter 5. For example, 37% equals 37 over 100, or 37 hundredths. Carlos eats a banana, an orange, and a blueberry muffin for breakfast. What fraction of the daily value of vitamin C does each item contain? So over here in our table, we have a banana. Oh, I see. Just a banana, not a banana muffin. I thought they were all muffins. All right. A banana, an orange, and a blueberry muffin. A banana has 15% of your daily vitamin C requirements. An orange has 113%, and a blueberry muffin, 0.5%, 0.5%. So here we go. First thing we're going to do is write 15% as a fraction. So 15% equals 15 over 100. And we have to write it now in simplest form. Both 15 and 100 can be divided by 5. I'm going to do a little margin work because that helps me see what's happening. All right, so 15 divided by 5 is 3. 100 divided by 5 is 20. So 3/20 is the simplest form of the fraction, which is equivalent to 15%. So 15% equals 3/20. And over here, they've used a hundreds grid or a 10 by 10 grid to represent 15% of 100. It's not very much, is it? All right, here we go. Now we're going to write 113% as a fraction. So 113% equals, they're going to have us do 100 over 100 plus 13 over 100, because this is the same as 100 plus 13, right? 113. So 100 over 100 plus 13 over 100. So 100 over 100, well, 100 divided by 100 is 1, right? That's a form of 1. All right, so 113% is 1 and 13 hundredths. So we write it as a mixed number. All right, finally, 0.5%, or 5/10 as a fraction. So here we have 0.5 over 100. So we want this to be a whole number. We don't want a decimal in a fraction. That looks really messy, doesn't it? So we're going to multiply the top and the bottom by 10 to move that decimal over. But if it moves it over here, it's also going to move it over here. And when we have an empty spot, an empty scoop, when we're multiplying by tens, we fill it with a 0. So we end up with 5 over 1,000. A 1 and then 1, 2, 3 zeros. 1, 1, 2, 3 zeros. So it ends up being 5 over 1,000. Now we have to write it in simplest form. 5 and 1,000 have a common factor of 5. So I'm going to divide by 5 over 5, or a form of 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 1,000 divided by 5. Well, think about 10 divided by 5. That's 2. And then I have a couple of zeros left over. So it's 1 over 200. So 0.5% equals 1/200. So we learned how to write percentages as a fraction. Right here, explain why two 10 by 10 grids were used to show 113%. So this was 113%. 100% of one of them, 13% of the second one. Why did we need two to represent that? Well, because, so we needed two 10 by 10 grids because 113% is greater than 100%. So it filled one whole grid and still had some left over. So it filled one whole grid and still had, oops, I'm not on the screen, sorry, 13 left over. On page 200, we're going to write 72% as a decimal this time. All right, so 72% equals 72 hundredths. Now listen to those words, 72 hundredths. So 72% is 72 out of 100. So we just write that as 72 hundredths. We already know how to do this. It's place value. So 72% is 72 hundredths. All right, write 4% as a decimal. So that's 4 out of 100. And we already know how to do this. 4 hundredths is 0 and 4 hundredths. But if you want to prove it through this division problem, we can absolutely do that. So 100 does not go into 4. 100 does not go into 40 either. It's bigger than 40. So we subtracted the 4, brought down the 0. Now we're bringing down this 0. 100 goes into 400 4 times, which is 400, and with a 0 for a remainder. So 4 hundredths. But if you can just say the name, you don't actually have to do all of this long division. All right, write 25 and 81 hundredths of a percent as a decimal. All right, so that would be 25.81 over 100. Okay, we don't want this decimal here, so we're going to multiply by 100 because we want it not to move one time, we want it to move 2 times. So we need 2 zeros in our 10. So it's not just one time, we need it to move 2 times, 2 zeros. So we're going to multiply by okay, so I was saying we can multiply by 100, and we can do that. I'll show you how it comes out. 100 over 100, and that would end up equaling 2,581 over 10,000. So this is 2,581 10,000ths, which looks like this. 2,581 10,000ths. Now the easier way to do this, I actually showed you kind of a complicated way, is what they're saying here. To divide by 100, move the decimal places 2 places to the left. So all we're going to do is go 1, 2, and we get 2,581 10,000ths. Notice that that would have worked up here also. So look at our final answer up here. We had a 4. If we took that decimal, moved it twice, moved it twice, we would have had 0.04. That's what we ended up with. Notice up here, if the decimal had started here, 1, 2, we would have had 0 and 72 hundredths. So that method absolutely works, and frankly, it's easier. All right, so here we go. We're going to write the percent as a fraction. We have 80% is 80 out of 100, and we can simplify that by a factor of 20. So I'm going to do some margin work. 80, 100 divided by 20 over 20 gives me 4 over 5. So this is 4/5. All right, here we have 150%. Now notice that's more than 100%, so I'm going to have a whole number out front. So I have 150 over 100 equals 100 over 100 plus 50 over 100. So 100 over 100 is just 1, right? 50 over 100 can be simplified by a factor of 50. They both have 50 goes into both of these evenly. I end up with 1 over 2. So it's 1/2. So this is 1/2. So my final answer is 1.5. All right, now 0.2%. In the initial problem, when we were making it into a fraction, we had to multiply by 10, which is what I was trying to do again up here. All right, so we go 0 over 0 and 0.2 over 100. I need to multiply by 10 over 10, which gives me 2 over 1,000, because I wanted to get that decimal out of there, but I had to do the same thing down here. Ends up being 1,000. Both 2 and 1,000 have a common factor of 2. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1,000 divided by 2, half of 1,000 is 500. And be sure and circle the answer. If you've got lots of messy work, which is fabulous, circle the answer so the teacher can find it easily. All right, now we're going to write the percent as a decimal. Here we go. We have 58%, which is the same as 58 hundredths. If you can say the name, you can just write it as the decimal. 58 hundredths is 58 hundredths. There it is, the decimal. 9 hundredths is 9 hundredths. The 9 has to be in the hundredths place. All right, let's take a look at our notes. All right, so write percents as fractions and decimals. Here's our notes. Write 15% as a fraction and as a decimal. So when you write as a fraction, make sure you simplify the fraction if possible. So here we have 15% equals 15 over 100. Divide by a factor of 1, 5 over 5. We end up with 3/20. And as a decimal, all we have to do is be able to say its name. 15% equals 15 hundredths. Therefore, it is 15 hundredths. All right, and lower on the page, if the percent is greater than 100%, you're going to end up with a whole number in the end. So 183% equals 1 83/100. That's the fraction form as a mixed number, and the decimal is 1 83/100.